Hi everyone, this is Scott Dudley from SaaS Startup Stories, and today my special guest is James Mulvany, who's based in Manchester in the UK. He's the founder and CEO at radio.co, podcast.co, and also matchmaker.fm, which are a suite of programs created for podcasters and audio producers. Welcome to the show, James. You ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, sure am. Thanks very much for having me. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going great. Great to have you on.
Yeah.
All right, I'm pretty excited about this one. I don't think I've ever interviewed anyone that's got three companies, so that must keep you busy. But yeah, I can imagine. All right, so let's begin with your background and what initially got you interested in starting a SaaS company in the first place.
Yeah, so I was originally like a radio nerd. When I was like growing up, 16, 17 years old, I wanted to be on the radio. I sort of started getting some work experience, working for local radio stations. And at the same time, this was like back in about 2004, 2005, I was also like learning how to build websites. So it really came, my kind of interest for that came around like sort of fusing the two together. I decided not to go into radio. I went off to university and I studied interactive multimedia, which is like a posh term for web design. I don't think it would be called that nowadays, but yeah. So I learned a little bit of code. I learned a bit about design, how e-commerce worked and all that kind of stuff. And then whilst I was at university, I set up a company called Wave Streaming, which was basically selling streaming media services to the radio industry. Fast forward a few years, sort of 2015, I'd graduated not long before. I then decided to sort of create a platform because we had more and more customers who were coming to us who weren't necessarily what you'd imagine to be like traditional radio stations. The products we sold through Wave Streaming were quite technical. So we thought, let's build a sort of super easy to use platform and sort of model it, around the sort of software as a service, business model. Launched that July 2015, really successful, very, very quickly. We grew to, I think, 1,000 users within our first year of operation.
Nice. Excellent. All right. So did you borrow VC money to launch your software companies, or have you been bootstrapping them instead? Tell us a bit about how you got these platforms off the ground.
Yeah. So initially, when I first set up like my first ever business when I was at university, I didn't obviously have any money. I didn't go and get VC. So it was really just bootstrapped. And I was doing everything myself. So I was like writing the code for the product we were selling. I was doing customer support, sales, designing the website, the whole lot, which was great. And at the time I loved it because it sort of allowed me to dip my toes in lots of different aspects of the industry. And again, I think this was in the late 2000s. And I don't think this term software as a service was even really a thing then. It was kind of, I was just running this internet business. And I remember being in this shared office and everyone in there was like, what, this kind of like crazy kid is making money on the internet. And they were running like these traditional sort of businesses. You'd imagine like, HR consultancies and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm making money online. And they just couldn't get their heads around it. But really, that's how it kind of started. It was a thirst to kind of do something that my friends were going out and getting part-time jobs. I just wanted to make a few quid on the side, and I wanted to see if I could do it online. And that's really how I got started. So effectively, bootstrapping, I suppose, was the way I got started. More recently, we've taken on some debt financing, which is how we kind of built and created podcast.co and Matchmaker. But yeah, I've been very lucky, never had to raise VC finance. And I think the benefit for me as a business owner is, you have complete control and you're ultimately in control of your own destiny, but you're not answering to like this board. You don't have to have these meetings with these suits every week and they're sort of chewing your ear off when you've not hit targets and stuff. So it does give you, I think, as an entrepreneur, a lot more freedom and flexibility. But then, of course, you have to be clever about how you're using your money to grow. And you have to think about, is that money we want to spend? I know a lot of sort of VC funded startups just end up, spending money on all sorts of crazy things. So you have to be very lean, I think, without doing that.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so tell me a bit about the specific services you're providing with these three platforms and how sort of one business led to creating the next business. There's obviously a sequence of how it developed.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, Scott, we launched radio.co July 2015. That grew really quickly. That is simply a radio station in a box. So it literally allows you to replace all the traditional things you'd need to start a radio station, a big fancy studio and all this equipment. And it just runs entirely from the cloud, just to completely simplify it. So you upload music, you can schedule playlists, you can broadcast live, and it will also allow you to get listeners tuning in from all sorts of devices, smart speakers, desktop, mobile, etc. So it's really like a radio station in a box for broadcasters. So that came around. We ran that, grew, as I say, pretty quickly between 2015, and then it got to about 2017, 18, and I was like, okay, what's next? And we had a lot of clients. Obviously, a lot of radio stations were starting podcasts around that time. Podcasting over the last 5 years has seen a big resurgence. So we thought, well, okay, let's build this as a feature on our platform. And the more we looked at the market, the more we thought, well, actually, there's two different businesses here. Yes, we could build this as a feature of radio.co, but why don't we build a standalone platform? We can link them together. There's going to be some crossover of the audience because a lot of radio stations want podcasts, but not every podcaster wants a radio station. So it kind of made sense to kind of spin it out as its own thing. So that was it. So we thought, okay, let's start sort of concepting this, and then we bought podcast.co to market in 2019. So it's still relatively young. And then the way that Matchmaker came around very briefly was when we were sort of gearing up to launch podcast.co, we were doing the same thing we did with radio. So we were creating lots of inbound marketing funnels, generate lots of great content. And when we were sort of sat with marketing thinking, right, what sort of funnels can we create? We thought, well, how about guests? Like most podcasts, I think it's like 70% of podcasts are based on interviews or talking to guests.
Yeah.
So let's create some funnels to drive traffic to podcast.co for people who are looking for guests, or people who are actually looking to be guests, like people who want to be, sort of grow their personal brand by appearing on podcasts and the like. So initially, we just created 2 Google forms on the podcast.co site. One was for podcasters looking for guests. One was for guests looking to be on podcasts. We SEO'd the pages pretty well, so they kind of climbed up on Google pretty quickly. And to our sort of amazement, people were filling out these forms, and we didn't just say like, give us your name and email. It was like, tell us about yourself. What sort of podcast do you want to be on, or what sort of guests are you looking for? And people were actually completing these forms with some detail, which was awesome. And it really sort of turned out to be like the very basic MVP of what is now Matchmaker.fm. We didn't spend any money on it. It was just, as I say, initially it was meant to just be a funnel, Scott, to get people onto podcast.co. Okay. But we realized very quickly, like, we had this data and we had actually no way of connecting these 2 groups of people together. So we thought, well, let's build something. That's really what led us to do Matchmaker.
Okay, yeah, there's a few other types of similar platforms around, but I'm a member of Matchmaker.fm as well, and I'd have to say that's the best one that I've seen. So it's it's an excellent website.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So how many employees do you have at the moment working on these platforms?
We've got about 35 across all three services.
And some of them would be crossing over onto more than one, wouldn't they? Sort of working on all 3, maybe.
So we have 3 separate development teams. So one team per product. And again, we have different support teams. So we have a separate sort of customer success support team for radio.co, which obviously has lots. We have quite a significant number of customers on that platform now. So that's a bit more beefy compared to say the support team for Matchmaker, which doesn't really require a lot of customer support.
Yeah.
So the staff are all balanced carefully across the 3 platforms. In terms of the crossover, it's mainly sales and marketing that work across both products. But even now, we've kind of started to separate them a bit just to make sure. Because I think, for example, when we were busy marketing and promoting podcast.co, we kind of took our eye off the ball a little bit on radio. So again, we've sort of we had a year where we weren't really focusing on radio, and we sort of started seeing a bit of a dip in the number of signups we were getting about this time last year. So we thought, well, we need to fix that, because the one thing you need to do as software as a service is keep growing, which can be quite difficult and challenging at times. But you've got to try and keep growing and make sure that your numbers are going up. And if you start plateauing, or even worse, your numbers start going down, then you've got a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you mentioned initially that you were sort of doing, everything, bit of jack of all trades in the beginning, but these days, do you get more involved in the coding side, or are you more focused on the marketing and business development, which I imagine you would be?
The latter. I did write code for many years, and probably not written any code now for about 8 years or something, like 2012.
Okay. Yeah.
When I started hiring developers when I started expanding the team, so I hired my first member of staff in 2010, and I would just literally finish university then, and that kind of allowed me to sort of start looking at the bigger picture. So the first member of staff I hired was actually to do customer support.
Okay.
The second member of staff I hired was a developer to work on the product itself. And then when I hired my first ever developer, I realized that actually I wasn't great. I used to think I was like this amazing coder. And I realized actually I was rubbish. I wasn't good at coding at all. Because this guy was just like churning out stuff and making amazing products that I could have even dreamt about building at the time, which was great because it allowed me then to be a lot more creative and push the boundaries of what we were creating. Whereas before I was really like restrained by my own skill set, I guess.
I see.
And also I'd spend then a long time trying to figure stuff out, and it wouldn't actually be very good in the end. So I kind of quickly moved away from the coding side of things. However, I would say that it was very useful having that foundation.
Because for sure.
I can go and speak to our developers and I can understand what they're talking about. I can't necessarily always, so I think having that technical understanding, and that as a founder, the ability to understand how your product's actually going to be built and the architecture and how you can kind of design it, really, really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a ton of sense. Yep. All right. So obviously you don't want to give away any secrets, but can you elaborate a little bit on your product roadmap for the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah. So I'll talk about Matchmaker, just because that's the youngest product. So we've got sort of, with radio.co, it's a fairly mature business now. Likewise with podcast.co, we're sort of working on continual improvements. But Matchmaker is the youngest platform. We only launched that February this year, so we've got lots of stuff planned. So we're really focusing on kind of trying to make the processes of owning that process for podcasters. So we've grown the community to 15,000 members now. We're actually about to hit 16,000, which is amazing, in like 9 months. So we're trying to think now is like, what value can we deliver? So at the moment, it's a great resource if you want to go and find guests for your show. Let's say you want to interview, I don't know, a real estate expert. You go onto Matchmaker, you can find people who have got expertise in that area, and you can reach out to them. But there's still like this process that most people use. So they'll use like a third-party tool such as Calendly to make the booking. And then they might use, I don't know, Zoom to record, or Zencaster. Yeah. So really what we want to be doing is creating like a complete process, which allows customers of Matchmaker to kind of eliminate those need for those third-party tools and really streamline that process. Also then, adding kind of a gamification to the platform. So you can say, well, maybe have like a badge once you've done 50 interviews or something like that. Or you can directly see the connections between, okay, this person's interviewed that person, like here's a link to that interview, or, here's a review of what they've sort of, how they thought it went. So yeah, that's kind of like largely our roadmap for the next sort of 6 to 12 months, I would say.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. That'd be awesome. Cool. All right. So how are you currently marketing to attract new users to these platforms?
Okay. So we've had a different approach with Matchmaker. Traditionally with radio and podcast, we're very much focused on inbound marketing, content marketing. So we create videos, we create written content. We have downloads of PDFs and that sort of thing. Very, very focused on email marketing as well. Those have always been our sort of staple methods to actually attracting the right audience. With Matchmaker, we've been very focused on actual outreach. So rather than sort of like creating loads of content, we have got some content which we've been using to divert traffic to Matchmaker. But we've actually been using LinkedIn, for example, as a tool to reach out to people who we think would be good candidates for the platform. Again, one of the reasons we did this to begin with was because we could really curate exactly who we wanted on the platform to make sure that we've got a good quality audience or good quality guests on the platform for podcasters, and also make sure that the podcasters are going to be great for guests too. So that's kind of been our focus there. Again, it's been very different. We've not used that method before as such, where it's been kind of outbound marketing or outbound sales. We normally say focus on inbound, but I think there's pros and cons to both really. And I can certainly see how it's I think for me, I'm more of a content guy. I'm a firm believer that like if you figure out solutions to what your clients want and put good value content out there, then they'll be able to come and discover you.
Yeah, I mean, I was contacted from you guys as well on LinkedIn, but I was already a member, so
yeah. Well, that's good. It shows that we're reaching the right people, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was the perfect prospect. That's right. Yeah. Cool. All right. So, what are the most common mistakes that inexperienced software founders make, in your opinion, seeing as you've got a bit of experience?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I mean, I'm looking at myself because, let's be honest. I've not every. We've talked about sort of my 3 current businesses, and we're doing pretty well now. But not every product or service I've ever launched has done well. I've had as many failures as I've had successes. I think where I've gone wrong in the past is. Certainly in the early days, I would have a new business idea every single week, and I'd be like registering domain names for these websites, and sometimes like half-assed kind of making a product or service, not really spending enough time on it. So I think number one, if you get something that starts to work, go 110% on that. Don't start getting like distracted like with other things like shiny object syndrome. Just focus on one thing and just go full pelt on it, especially once it starts to generate revenue, once it starts to work. The other thing as well is make sure, again, this is where I've tripped up in the past, just make sure you do your research, make sure that there's actually a demand for the product. I think just sometimes because you think it's a good idea or because it's a product that you would like, doesn't necessarily mean that lots of other people would. So, and the final thing is try and, when you're developing an idea or a product, figure out, can you really genuinely add value to that market? Again, I think I went wrong somewhere where I launched a product a few years ago where we were struggling to kind of do some stuff that other people weren't. It was very difficult to actually get that cut through because basically our product was the same as everyone else's. So yeah, we got some customers, but it just didn't get the momentum that was needed. So in the end, we ended up selling that business at a loss. I'd spent more on it than it had generated, and certainly spent a lot more on it than we sold it for. So I think make sure that you've got a kind of clear route to market, but then make sure that you've got a clear idea of how you can actually add value to that market or disrupt it, I suppose, is the sort of the term that's thrown around.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so how do you approach onboarding, reducing churn, and retaining paying customers? I guess that's one of the huge challenges for any SaaS business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, number one, you've got to make sure you take care of your customers. Again, it depends on the service you're running. Some services are much more dependent and high demand on kind of customer success and support than others. But make sure ultimately everyone is taken care of. And sometimes you have to look at do you need to scale that team? We had a very good few months sort of at the start of lockdown on radio.co. So we needed to quickly hire, we ended up hiring 3 extra sort of customer service reps, in a really short space of time, just because we were getting so many inquiries and so many questions that our kind of current team were overworked suddenly. So it's just being reactive to the environment there. In terms of retaining customers, there's no sort of magic formula. I don't think. You ultimately got to make sure that your product's solid, and try and think about, if customers are canceling, you're actually finding out why. This is, again, something that we've been working on a lot recently, actually finding out the reasons why people are canceling. If it's to do with money, offer them a discount. If it's to do with, the fact that they're sort of shopping around, maybe trying other competing products, just make sure that you're constantly reminding them that you're still there, because they might end up coming back in a few months. Again, we see this a lot. People will go, especially in a market where there's, maybe 3 or 4 other options that they're considering. They might sign up with you, they play around with your product for a month or 2, they'll go somewhere else. But you need to make sure that then you're giving people the ability to come back and remind them you're still there. especially if your product is actually better than your competitors, because then they'll go try the competitors' products and end up coming back to you anyway, which we see a lot of the time actually. You know, so again, like using retargeting on your adverts, just to kind of remind people to come back to your site. It's not expensive. Again, retargeting I think is great, because you can kind of almost be showing your logo to people, following them around the internet without them sort of subconsciously acknowledging it. But that's a good way of sort of building that brand loyalty and sort of ensuring people are coming back.
Yeah, it sort of makes it impossible for them to forget about you, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so you sort of already covered this a little bit, but what was the biggest challenge that you had to face when you first started with SaaS, and how did you go about overcoming it?
The biggest challenge, I think, for anyone is just getting customers. You know, like anyone can build. You've got an idea for a product. You create the product. The challenge is then getting people on board and getting people using the product. And I think that's really the sort of the main challenge for any SaaS company. I suppose you could argue, you've got to build the products in the first place. So yeah, I think it's multi-layered, isn't it? This question. I don't think there's one answer. Again, like some people are really good at creating products, but then rubbish at marketing, and then other people are brilliant at marketing, but their product sucks, or they don't have the kind of the technical resource or technical knowledge to kind of back up what they're trying to sell. So it's just making sure that you've kind of got your team in place and making sure that you've got a firm idea of what it is you're selling and how you're going to actually approach that market.
So with radio.co in the beginning, was there a free trial for that, or was it straight into a paid plan?
Yeah, it was a free trial, 7 days free trial. We've stuck with that model. It's always worked for us. One of the mistakes actually we made with radio.co, which we didn't do with podcasts, is we actually spent probably a year and a half or a year or so creating the platform, right? So we were, building it in stealth mode. We had a website, and all it had on it was coming soon, enter your name and your email to be notified. So, which was fine. We got some people opting in. And as I say, because I had a previous business in the industry, it was kind of easy to launch it. But one of the things we didn't do was we didn't start creating content or actually marketing until we launched the product. So yeah, then we put the site live. And of course, it then probably took a year or so to build up the domain authority. So we were actually getting our articles ranked.
Yeah.
So it was because, so with podcast.co, we started marketing and we started creating content the day we started building the platform. So we had a kind of a year or so's worth of content on a website. We didn't even have anything to sell. We were just trying to build the brand as a kind of an authority in the marketplace, in our niche, before we actually, started promoting the platform. So I think if you've hired a development team to create a product, well, at least hire someone in marketing to start creating content, or you can even outsource that, really. But that I think was kind of one of the hurdles. One of the things we went seriously wrong with radio.co. So we made sure that when we launched podcasts, we already had a sort of a brand that we'd kind of started working on and creating.
Okay, makes sense. All right. So what are your favorite online tools and platforms that you use to run your business?
So generally speaking, we use Google G Suite for most of our kind of internal communications, Google Docs, all that stuff. We use Trello heavily. I like using various tools to sort of record podcasts. So there's a bunch out there at the moment, like Descript is great for editing podcasts. Riverside FM and Welder, we've been using those to record them. Obviously, big fan of Matchmaker, my own platform, which is great for kind of getting on podcasts as well. But yeah, I think there's just the kind of normal tools. I don't think there's anything like really kind of out there. I mean, another couple of things that I was just looking at this morning, which were really, really good tools. If you're doing research for, interviewing a guest, there's a tool which a guy just introduced me to. It was called alsoasked.com. Bit of a hard one to say, that alsoasked.com. And basically you can type in a subject and it's almost like a reverse search engine. So it will come up with like a bunch of questions. So if you're interviewing someone who's an expert in, say, like, I don't know, real estate, but you're not an expert in real estate, well, you can type that term in and it will come up with questions relevant for that person. So that's another pretty cool tool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good segue to the next question. What are you curious about or researching right now regarding SaaS?
I don't know if I'm researching anything specifically. I think we're at a stage where we're mainly, I think you can never stop learning. So it's always good to be, finding out sort of different trends and behaviors. Like one thing that fascinates me is TikTok.
Okay.
I've still not really got my head into TikTok. I uploaded a couple of videos, but like, I think that's obviously clearly becoming like this next big thing, like Instagram was maybe 5-10 years ago. So, I'm kind of curious to know how we could potentially use that. Like I say, we've been creating video for like 10 plus years to as a way of promoting our products and services. But I think TikTok would be really interesting. I think also it's just about like listening to your existing customers and listening to your market and finding out what they're interested in. So like, you can never take your eye off the ball there either.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so just to wrap up, where can people go to find out more about radio.co, podcast.co, and matchmaker.fm? I guess it's a bit of a redundant question, but...
Yeah, visit those sites. As I mentioned earlier, that, it depends what you're looking for, but certainly if you're listening to this podcast and you're a software as a service founder, being on podcasts is a fantastic way to raise awareness of your product or your service. So check out matchmaker.fm. That's probably the most useful, I reckon, to your audience. And also, if you want to get in touch with me, if you go to jamesm.com/connect, that's where all my social media links are.
Okay, brilliant. All right, then. Thanks for being on the show, James. I really appreciate your time.
Cheers, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks.